Okay, so you've had a chance to read over the lab. You've had a chance to find a few points for Minnetonka, and I was asking you to find for me using the website that's listed here, timeanddate.com /sun. Find the high and the low for Minnetonka. Now, I got asked a question already, and I'm sure there'll be more, but we have a high amount and a low amount, and I just want to do one equation with you for that. So, can somebody tell me what day had the high? Was it June something? June what? 21st. Do you guys all agree it was June 21st? Okay, good. Then did anybody look up what day, what number day is June 21? Because you can't graph June 21. 172nd. All right, so then we go 172, comma, and then what was the high amount of sunlight for here in Minnetonka for the 172nd day? 15 hours and 37 minutes. So can I just put 15.37? No, I can put 15 plus 37/60ths. Did anybody get the decimal for that?
15.6.
All right, I'm going to call that 15.62. Can anybody verify 15.62? All right, good. So then, now I've got a time, like what day that happened, and how much sunlight we had. That's the high, and now we have to have the low. What day of the year was that? Was that December something? December what? 22nd. And then what, anybody look up the date? 356? 356. On the 356th day, there was how much sunlight? First, let's start with the hours and minutes. 8 hours, 47 minutes, but then we got to change that to 8 hours plus 47/60. Somebody help me out. What is that? 8.73? 78. Let's go with 8.78. Okay. It's kind of tedious, but the real world is kind of difficult. Can you imagine when you get into like rockets and the Earth is spinning and we're trying to launch something to Mars and Mars is moving and we're spinning and we're like, there's so many things that you'd have to factor into an equation. It's like, this is messy just because I got to do a couple of simple changes. All right, so there's my 2 points. I got a high, I've got a low. Now, I want to actually work through what would be the equation for that. Everybody, draw a dotted line right down the middle like this. And if you haven't already set it up as a wave where you have a high spot and a low spot, I encourage you to do that. I know the data doesn't care that it's a high spot, but I think you do. I think it's good for you to see that. And it helps you to go, oh yeah, it's how high it is, so that's these numbers that I will average to find that middle, the dotted line down the middle. I'll be your calculator. Jack, tell me what to do to the 15.62 and the 8.78. How do I do that? Okay, I'm adding them together. And they add up to 24.4 and divide by 2, average of 12.2. Okay. Then, that tells me two things. Y equals A cosine B theta minus C plus D. I now know right away that this is how far up the whole thing's been shifted, and that's this. So this is 12.2. And A is from here to here, and so that's from 12.2 to 15.62. I get 3.42. Anybody verify that? All right, 3.42 is my A then. We're just using 2 decimal places to keep life simple. Now I'm going to put the B in red and put the C in red. Those are the two things I don't have yet, but one of them is super easy. Clara, do you know what that shift is?
Yeah, it's over 170.
Yes, because this would be at 0, 0, but it's been shifted over, and that's this far. So that's 172. And last but not least is the b. Now for this, we can say period is 2 pi over b, and we can do a really complicated calculation, but I let you out of that the other day. Does anybody remember what I said? Instead of having to go and say how many days is it from here to here, and then go, okay, how many days? We're going to go with, we know what the period should be. This is a year. It happens every year, right? So what's the period? 365. Because, you know, the other thing, sometimes there's 2 days that are the longest day of the year, and that messes with the data. We would prefer that it just be the period is 365. And there's also leap years in there, and life is so messy in the real world. So we're going to just use that because it's so much easier. Now, if you did figure out from this to this, and you figured out it should have been about half of 365, and then you'd have to double it, and then it should end up being 365 anyways. It's just that if there's 2 days that were the longest day, then that could mess it up, for example. And there's other things too. In the end, b must be 2 pi over 365. And that looks like something that would be standard, wouldn't it? No matter what kid was doing what city. All right, so 2 pi over 365. That essentially is the lab. I just did it. Now, what would I get for my score? Not a really good score. I didn't write the purpose on my lab. I didn't have reflections about my lab. I didn't show the graph. I mean, I got a sketch here, but you guys are going to do it neatly on Desmos, and then you're going to graph this on Desmos. Pay attention to this. You're not only going to graph your data points, you're going to then graph this line. And some people freak out when they don't hit exactly, but Desmos is going to have in 15 points that you pick. You just have to make sure you've picked a high spot and a low spot out of your 15 points. If you don't have the highest and the lowest spot, this won't work. Then when you graph it, do you get that sometimes some of your points don't end up being exactly on the graph? But if there's any that are like going like way off the line, then you know something probably is wrong. Okay, they should all be super close to the line. But if they're off a little bit, don't freak out. I'll give you an example. If I graphed your heights and the length of your index finger, it would be pretty much a straight line, but it wouldn't be exactly a straight line. And the line would go through most of the data points, but not all of them. Does that mean we should change the line to like somehow hit that point? No, that's you just get as close as you can. So real world doesn't always fit the data points. That's right on the list of ACT topics that kids have to understand because it's such a big misconception. People are like, well, clearly the line is wrong because it doesn't hit these 2 points. No, you have to understand that the line can't hit all of the data points. It just has to do its best to get close. All right, does that mean then that it's a perfect predictor of everything? No, it's just going to be close to the right amount. So if we guess the right amount of daylight, it might be off a minute because maybe our data is slightly off. All right, so don't forget to do everything that is in this lab. And the way I would start is to just go down and write a purpose statement, and you can't use these exact words. You have to re-summarize it in your own words. Then you're going to pick your city. I would pick someplace that you have visited in the past or someplace maybe you want to visit in the future. You can't use Minnetonka, just to clarify, because I've already done that one. We just did it. That's not fair, okay? And you can't even just use the city that's right next door to Minnetonka because you'd get the same data, right? So you need to do a city that is away from here. Imagine you're going to travel someplace. All right. Do you have to make 30 data points? No, 15 is fine. Next, calculations. You have to show step by step. I'm telling you, this is a really important part of the lab. How you got this equation. Like, you got to really break it down. I know how you got it, unless you cheated. But that's partly what we're doing here is some kids are going to get their answer and like from their friend, and I want you to have to explain how exactly you got everything. One other thing is if your data exactly matches any other kid's data, we know you're cheating. And we do compare. We have caught kids before who have, hey, can you just give me your info? Because I need the lab and I'm really running behind. So tell me everything and I'll just copy yours. Well, then you're cheating. And then we've had that become a really big deal for some kids. All of a sudden they got to go talk to principals and then they got to redo their whole thing because they shared it with somebody else. So don't. Just make them go get their own data. You want to help? You want to help them with how to do it? Cool. Don't give them your data. All right. So a few other things about your equation. You must have a graph with labels. The most common thing marked wrong is, oops, I forgot to label my graph. So when you make your beautiful Desmos graph and it looks like this and you screenshot it, if it doesn't have labels, you need to add labels. You know what I mean? You could have this gorgeous graph that you take from Desmos, which you should. Why handwrite it? But you got to then write in what was this and what was this, and it needs a title at the top. Okay, so those are some of the most common things kids do wrong on this lab. And now you have a whole bunch of time. Pick any city you want, but get your own data points. If you and Bob also picked Alaska, I can't prove that you were cheating, but if you and Bob have Anchorage, Alaska, and you have picked the exact same 15 points, that was definitely cheating. There will be the same high and the same low, but, okay, yes?
How do you graph the middle line of Desmos?
You do not have to graph this line on Desmos. You can just handwrite it in and like write what it is, like 28 or whatever.
So you like screenshot it?
So you're going to screenshot it anyways, right? That's the only way you're going to get it to me is through a screenshot. So you're going to screenshot it, and once you put it into, I'd put it into Notability, and in Notability you can write on top of pictures. So then you could write the labels in, you could write that dotted line in. That's a good point about, because the dotted line, there's probably a way to make a dotted line on Desmos. I just don't know what it is, and I'd be fine with you handwriting that in. Charlotte?
When does this due?
When does it due? Good question. I feel like it should be due tomorrow because then you'd all be able to do it. Honestly, if you think of this as, oh, this is some huge project, it might take you a long time if you think of it that way. It's just like, it's seriously, the only problem is getting the data. And once you gather the data for 15 minutes, then it's like a test question you could do in 2 minutes. It's just the data gathering and the writing it up. So think of this as, this is an assignment you should finish tonight. But if you don't, the official date is the day after the test. And right now what we're planning on is tomorrow's a review of everything day. And the next day is the test. Okay, so tomorrow's Wednesday, review everything, test Thursday. Then it's due Friday. Because that way the lab can be also done on the day after the test when you won't have any other homework hanging over your head. Okay? So if I were you, be nice to later you. Get it done today. Like you could literally walk out of the room today with all 15 points. And you've got me here to help you, okay? And from there, it's just graphing them on Desmos. And remember, on Desmos to graph a point, you just put in this and then 101, comma, 13.25 or whatever. You put it in a parenthesis, it'll have a little box that says label. And you just check that box, and then it'll label that spot on your graph. It looks really clean and nice. And then to graph the cosine equation, you write y equals, 2.8 cosine of, and I did have some people like, how the heck do I put in 2 pi over 365? You may want to put it in a parenthesis, like this. So when you're typing that into Desmos, maybe put your fractions in parentheses. That's a safe way to keep your order of operations from getting screwed up. All right. It'll take a little work. That's why it's summative and it's worth a lot more than a regular homework assignment. All right. And it's due again the day after the test, which I believe will be Friday. It's humanly possible. If I feel like I need to, I could shift everything a day. But for right now, the earliest the test will be is Thursday. And then this would be due Friday. If for some reason I just move the test to Friday, then of course I'd bump this to Monday. But you should be able to finish it tonight. All right, that's all I got for you for the explanation of how to do the lab. The rest of the time is you work on the lab and come up and ask me questions.